Fuck, I need to bring the headphones from my house.
You know what's great is y'all were just talking about golf, and I put out a thing on Instagram. What do y'all want to hear people talk about? And we had one guy say, I want to hear them talk about golf. And that guy was you. And then we had two people be like, anything but golf. Mia, and I forget who the other person was. I'll look it up.
Mia's a hater.
That was funny.
Man, it's so fun. We, they come over to our house all the time and just hang out, whatever. We live close by. And Kyle and I will go on these tangents about college football, and she just hates it.
Yeah.
Anything to do with football or golf.
Catan and CrossFit. Yes. That's it.
I know. She's a huge Catan
player. A two-trick pony.
I'd be interested to, I think she could potentially win the world championship at Catan.
Because I'm not in the field.
Yeah, because you haven't been doing it.
You should have been around in 2013 when there was every brand like blank and blank. Catan and CrossFit would have been a good one.
Yeah. Caffeine and kilos.
Yeah, remember there was 100 of those bitches.
That's the only one I know.
No, I mean, I'm not going to be able to pull up a single one now that I've said it, but it was everything.
It's like the no vowel brands.
Yeah, it was the no vowels before no vowels.
Yeah.
We were that at one point in time.
We were that well ahead, I'd say.
Yeah. We have it, right?
We deleted it out of respect.
Yeah.
I still feel like we should maybe just put the E and the I back in it. I like the name.
Well, people still say design.
I know. And it's been, how long has it been? A year?
Almost a year. Yeah. I think August of last year is when we did it.
Yeah. For those who can't piece put the dots together, TTD Compete used to be called Design.
Yeah. And it was spelled
DSGN.
DSGN. And
the problem is that over the course of 2 years, everyone went with the no vowel. That was a thing.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
How did our thing become a thing?
I feel like for me, it was like I had it with Shrugged. I had that drop everything and train.
Yeah, we talked about that. The 4-letter DEET
looking thing. Yeah. And then when it came time to make this, I was like, I'm going to do something like that. And then just over time, the 4 thing became everyone's favorite thing. And I was like, fuck this.
When we left the games that year,
I don't want to be another one of these people.
I just realized that's what that stood for.
What?
The DEET. I had no clue. I've seen it. I had no idea.
I like that.
Most people didn't.
Yeah.
I like it too.
Yeah. Did you drop everything if you were going to go train?
Well, what's funny is
put it down.
Well, what's funny is there was a 3 in there, and people were like, "Oh, you're so artsy with your 3." But the whole reason we started Drop Everything and Train is we got so busy that we were like, we got to just pick a time and train at that time instead of being like when. And so we picked 3, and that's why it was originally just for us internally.
Yeah.
And then
like you literally were dropping all your work and
at
training.
3 p.m.
Yeah. I do think it is a good skill to have just for time management to every day it's the same time. I know that's not possible, for people that are maybe crazy busy, but I'm going to train at 7 a.m. every single morning. At least that's priority and you can get it in.
I would like to do that, but I'm too lazy of a morning person. As productive as I try to be for the day, sometimes I'll just lay there for an hour. Be like, what just happened? I didn't move yet.
Yeah. I think we're the opposite. We talked about that before. I don't like doing stuff at night. And I know you're you can crush, your brain still works really well, but after 7 p.m., my brain doesn't work
You're
anymore.
just ready for bed.
And just I'm like, kids, go to bed.
Yeah.
I'm so much better in the morning. So, 5 a.m. I can think and just have my coffee and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, that's not me.
What are you, Chris?
It's interesting. I feel like I'm a morning. I prefer morning. If I can get my schedule where I'm waking up, I feel like the first thing I do in a day is when whatever I pick that to be is when I'm going to be either my most creative or most productive.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I do like working at night though. Those after 7 when the world's shutting down.
Yeah.
I can also do that.
Typing,
but I think I prefer morning.
Writing.
So I'd say morning person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really can't think at night. I think I'm just too tired at that point. And maybe that's bad.
Yeah, it's because you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that's also true.
Was this pre-kids too?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've always been a morning person. Even in college when we didn't have to be up, I would get up and go and do the stuff that I needed to get done.
I like everything about the morning.
Yeah,
me
too,
like the
man.
peacefulness. And everyone's all about, when I went to California, everyone wanted to watch the sunset. I was like, no, man, let's do the sunrise. Come on, get with it.
Well, you really can't see the sunrise in California that well, right?
Shh, don't tell them. You can't watch the actual sun. True.
The East Coast sunrise is amazing. We went to the beach a couple years ago in Florida, and it was that's what I did every morning. Of course, Jordan's still sleeping. She sleeps until 9 a.m. And I went out at 6 a.m. every morning, just had some coffee, watched the sunrise.
One of the worst emotional experiences in my life was college football. The conditioning test was 300-yard shuttle run. And
we did the same thing.
So you had two of them back to back on a 1 minute rest. And you have like times for each position, and linebackers are like the middle time. So you had to be, I think it was under 50 seconds for both of them. So the first one, running a 300-yard shuttle in under 50 seconds is not really that hard if you're like selling out. So I think I came in at like 49. Then I was wrecked, and I was like
1 minute is nothing.
Yeah. Then I think I was like a minute or 58. So I failed the conditioning test, and the rule was that you had to become part of the morning run club. And Lehigh University is on a freaking mountainside. So you start the runs like up the hill and over. And I was like, this is the worst punishment in the world. Why are we doing this early in the morning? It made me want to stop playing football.
Who makes it, it's even worse for is the roommate of that person that has to get up. And I say that knowing my college roommate my freshman year, he failed it like 6 straight weeks. Like this dude, he was so out of shape. But he had to get up, and he was so loud. Like he genuinely was trying to be quiet, but he's just like one of those guys that like get up and it's like
like,
bro, like what are you doing?
Yeah, that's me, except like running into things in the morning, running into walls.
See. I need my glasses on.
It's funny, for years I've heard you say Lehigh, and one time you wrote it down, and I was like, oh, the word is Lehigh. I thought it was your high school.
Dude, people think that all the time.
You know, like me saying Cordova High.
Yeah.
Like I've never met anyone who includes the high. But that's the actual, it's Lehigh High, right?
Yeah. No, it's Lehigh University.
Oh, it's a college?
It's my college.
Oh, I always thought you were talking about high school. Now it's even weirder.
It's all making sense now.
And what football play lasts for 50 seconds?
Yes.
That you have to have somebody running 300 yards.
Right. Well, did you do the one that was 100 down, back down, or 50s?
50s.
Okay, 50s. So makes a little bit more sense, right? A lot of schools still do the 100 down and back, which makes no sense because you're never running that far.
Yeah.
We did 25 down and back, which probably makes the most sense
because it's kind of cutting.
You're cutting. You're doing 11 cuts and 300 yards. None of those, though, make sense for what you need to do in football, other than just like them trying to make you mentally tough or whatever else it is. But that's most things in football.
What do you think about these down and backs we're doing in CrossFit now?
Oh, the 25 footers. Oh, baby.
That's even weirder. I like that they introduced running. I think that's probably the only realistic way they can do that with hundreds of thousands of people
in the open.
Yeah. But I mean, the reality is like, it just became like a slow jog where there wasn't really ever a cut. So probably not the best test.
The top, I was actually pretty impressed with like the top, like the people that were in the 12, 13 minute range. They actually kind of still were running and cutting pretty hard. But I think it just becomes about how fast you can, while you're tired, still accelerate out of the cut.
Yeah.
Because you're basically doing like 2 acceleration steps and then slowing down, waiting to do the turnaround 2 acceleration steps. And you're kind of just accelerating the whole time.
That kind of
is a weird way to run.
That makes me think of something that I actually wanted to ask you too, is going through all the semifinals. Now they're over. We have last chance qualifier and then obviously the game. So things are much more narrow now. We know exactly who's going to make it other than the last chance people. One of the things I noticed is that the gap is still so wide from like, let's say the top, really like maybe 6 or 8 individuals on the male and female side in all these semifinals, basically those that are actually competing to make the games.
Yeah.
And then even like the bottom 10 in a semifinal. So I wanted you to speak to that, and I'll let you get to that in a second. But then the same thing is true in kind of like the RX field, like those that are bubble semifinal athletes to the person that's just qualifying for like the RX field in, let's say, Wadapalooza or Grand Games or something like that. Like these gaps are still so wide. I'm just so interested as to why that is.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the gap, at least in semifinals, I think that some of it is emotionally driven because the people that are in the top 5 or in the hunt for the top 5, or by the end of the weekend that are in the hunt for the top 8, are still motivated because their goal is still possible. I feel like a lot of the people that get into that first heat, or maybe even the second heat, are kind of demoralized by the process. And I think part of good competing is learning how to be in that state and still getting the best out of yourself. But I've been in that situation with people, and it's really hard because their whole energy is defeated and demoralized because they went there with this specific goal of doing well or making the games. But there's also a physical gap. I'm not going to lie. There's definitely a huge skill gap. I think the sport is it's super young. The rules aren't super clear. The training style that most of the people that are like, oh, I'm a bubble athlete, I'm just trying to get in. Like I sat down with David Bradley and we did like our evaluation of what he needs to do to get to semifinals next year and to get better for the sport. And I'm like, well, it's really kind of simple. It's going to be all in the gym stuff. Like you don't need to be running and swimming and doing some of the stuff that Travis and Noah might do year round because it's not going to be tested. So I think you do all that testing, then maybe you get to like the workouts this year at pretty much at every semifinal had like something, like all the Lowlands ones were interval. They were different. They were kind of strange. There was huge sets of devil's press. I don't think a lot of people are training those styles of workouts to get ready just to qualify in. So I feel like some of those gaps at each level is based on what they are doing for training. And it's almost like you have to level up until you can train them all and close the gaps.
So in other words, someone that's trying to make a semifinal may just be training to do really well in an open and quarterfinal setting where it's almost like all true CrossFit 15-minute AMRAP, 10 rounds for time or whatever, but they're not ready for the semifinal tests.
Yeah, it's ironic because like your training makes you less fit. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to get 5 tests and historically one of them's a strength test, your strength is so far away. Well, you just got to keep getting stronger then. So say 80% of the training's organized around getting stronger so they can just play the game on that one thing. That means that a lot of the training time that might be on other fitness things like maintaining running or being on a field and pushing things or doing a bunch of echo bike work or doing things that don't come up in that stage, they just don't even get trained.
Right.
So those gaps I feel like are partially because at each stage, somebody has to specialize to get good enough to make it through. Like there's people that are, the way the fitness tests are done, like I could use myself an example. If you took me and you took an average person, not like a professional CrossFit athlete, but you just said, hey, somebody that does CrossFit, and then you gave us 20 open tests, but then you created a whole nother time of the year, you created 20 fitness tests where there was running and swimming and sleds and sprinting and throwing things and heavy lifting and some long stuff. You would have 2 totally different score profiles. I'd probably get crushed in all the open stuff. So if I said, hey, I want to be a CrossFit athlete, I'd probably have to get less fit because I'd have to train all open related stuff.
Less well-rounded fit.
Yes.
More specific to the open fit.
More sports specific fitness. Yeah. Like I'd need to do hundreds of toes to bar and double unders and burpees. And like, I wouldn't do any strength work. I'd probably get a little bit weaker.
So do you think that is then like a deficit that CrossFit has in their testing body? Or do you think that that's needed to kind of like have stages for the game?
For those on the audio experience, there was a big smile from Max.
I just didn't know, like, I feel like we went for years with the regime of CrossFit being so penalizing to naysayers that I've practiced keeping my thoughts in about it. Yeah. But I think
I think we could do this in a way that's fair.
For sure. Yeah. And I just be honest about it. I think for the last 15 years, since 2007, there's been discussion about whether or not the CrossFit tests were valid. And the previous regime would say, well, the fit is winning, right? Like no matter what we do and in what order we're doing, we're only testing for the fittest.
Which is true.
Which is great. I actually feel like it might be better to go back to the thought that it's like, hey, this is the fittest on earth test. It's not a sport. I think that gets rid of some of the issues that we deal with. However, the whole market is trying to turn it into a sport. And if you have a sport, then you should have a categorization system. Like they started with these levels. And I'm like, yeah, but all of your levels are being built on open style tests, which are not fully comprehensive tests of fitness. They're not covering, even according to their own ideology, the 10 general skills of training. They're not covering all the energy system modalities. There's been nothing in the open that's under 2 minutes long. So that other than a strength test.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a problem with that in that 99% of the people participating in the sport are actually, in order to get good at it, are actually going to potentially sacrifice their ability to be more well-rounded fit according to why we would do CrossFit in the first place.
What do you
What's
say,
the solution to that? I don't know. But
what do you say to the argument that Castro has given in the past that there are these stages, and so the fittest, those that are at the games, will touch all of them?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the fittest, like the top 40. But I don't know if at the semifinal level, if you didn't do all of that, like for this year, for example, I think 2 of the semifinals had swimming. So if you change that, would all the semifinals have been the same outcomes?
Absolutely not.
I think you would definitely, because you
sure.
have 1/6 of the testing body is now dictated by something that a lot of these athletes don't train.
Right.
So it reorganizes, it recategorizes. Maybe the top 1, 2, and 3 at every semifinal stays pretty close to the same, even if you put swimming in it, but maybe that 4 and 5 changes. So over the course of 10 semifinals, that means there's 20 different people in the CrossFit Games than originally existed. So now the argument of like, well, is it okay because the fittest go through? I'm like, well, no, it's only okay if you're talking about like the top. It's probably like 15 people, male and female, in the world that it literally just doesn't matter what you put in. They're just good enough to make it happen. But for everybody else underneath that, it does matter. It matters at every stage. It's going to matter. There's probably people that didn't make it through quarterfinals because of one strength test that are actually fit enough if you put them in semifinal with the right subset of tests to make the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
Which most people don't see because they're not training a lot of athletes that are not at all these various levels. But I've seen it. I've seen people that finish in the middle of the pack of a quarterfinal or like 500th in a quarterfinal beat Travis on a specific workout or or a couple different types of workouts. So you're like, all right, well, now the testing does matter.
Yeah, when you put it that way, you are talking about half the games field if the semifinal tests were changed. And that's not even, swimming is maybe an outlier because that's something that some people are just really bad at. Yeah. But you could even change one of the tests, change the legless rope climb test. It would be a perfect example that maybe it wouldn't have changed half the games field, but it would have changed at least 3 to 4 of those spots because some people were really bad at the legless rope climb that should have got in, or some were really good at that test that maybe wouldn't have been better or good at something that was a little bit heavier or something or more high skill in another area.
Yeah. The testing matters so much. And I think it's starting to matter even for a lot of the highest level people. There's probably 2 people in every semifinal that are going to make it unless they're like sick or something goes wrong. But I think for everybody else, it really does matter.
Yeah. How would you, if you're programming, and not to get in like the nitty gritty here, what would you do? How would you change the open if the process had to stay the same? There's an open, there's a quarterfinals, there's semifinals, and games. Would you adjust that all around, or would you kind of keep it in the same format?
I haven't really put a lot of thought into this. My initial thought is if we're trying to create a universal test in the open, if the point is to actually make it a decent fitness test, I think the test should be a little bit more boring. Like, I like the idea of a CrossFit total that shows up in a quarterfinals, but like, well, why aren't regular? Why isn't that one? Why is pure strength in its absolute form? Why is that not one of the most important styles of tests to do for just like an average person? Because that's one of the most important training priorities. If you just like broke it down simply and you said, hey, here's an average person and I want them to be CrossFit. I want them to be a good representation of health, fitness, strength, vitality, and all this shit. You'd be like, all right, get strong, build a basic conditioning base and move well. It's like, but the tests don't really do any of those things. The strength test is usually done like in the middle of getting dominated by a Metcon.
15-minute AMRAP and then built to 1RM clean.
And it's something super complicated, like a snatch or a clean and jerk, which again, a fitness test for a professional athlete, great. A fitness test for a 50-year-old, I don't know. I mean, I think you'd probably get good enough results with a back squat or a front squat. So these are, I think, cultural problems that the sport of CrossFit and the community of CrossFit have to solve. You got to decide, is this about creating a spectacle? Is the open about creating participation? Is it actually about sourcing the best, highest fitness people to get into quarterfinals? Or do we not give a shit about that because we're cutting it to 10%? Do they need to be entertaining and fire people up? My biggest problem now is that we just don't know. It seems like things are just being done, and they're being done like, well, this is how it's done in the past, so we're going to create Metcons like this, or here's a cool Metcon, or these are the movements that are being used. But I thought that the change in administration, ownership, what part of that process was going to be, what are we doing? And like, why are we doing it? How are we doing this? And that communication would be displayed out and that there would be feedback back and forth. I don't know. I mean, I personally haven't seen a lot of that. It seems more so like YouTube or Instagram is a platform for people to provide that criticism and hope that somebody in charge is kind of listening and takes that in and, starts to make those decisions.
Yeah. So where would the testing body, I'm going to just keep pushing back on this.
Yeah.
I'm just interested to know your thoughts on this. What would it look like then going from open to a quarterfinals? If it had to be a 10% cut, what would you put in the open versus quarterfinals? And the same thing is true once you cut down to, let's just say,
You can't let them just kill the open.
Yeah.
No.
All right. So
30 people go to a semifinal.
I'd like to kill the open, but let's say
kill
it
the
was-
open.
yeah.
Okay.
But let's say it was 3 tests. Test 1 could be 2 barbell strength movements and some gymnastic strength component. Test 2 could be a rowing test, and test 3 could be a Metcon.
Yeah.
So you get basic strength, basic conditioning, and a basic CrossFit thing. The standards of that are easy to judge. It's much harder to cheat doing something like that. It's much easier to set up in a gym, maybe a little bit less exciting, but there's only really like 1 test in there.
Hold on. If we're going to be talking about exciting, I don't want to hear it because none of this shit's been exciting
That's true.
for a
That's
long
true.
time.
That's
so if we're
true.
going to stay boring, party on.
Yeah,
dog.
that's true.
Yeah, I would say the open tests this year were not exciting.
Like exciting
No,
tests.
not fun to watch.
Yeah. So I think if you did that, it's like, if you look at those tests and you said, okay, can those tests separate a 25-year-old professional athlete from another 25-year-old professional athlete? Yes. Are those tests accessible to a 50-year-old that is just getting into CrossFit and wants to have some sort of repeatable metric every year to know that they're getting better? Yes. And it's actually probably a better way to know you're getting more fit, because there's not like, you can just get better at like one skill of an open workout and make it seem like you're getting more general fitness. It's very hard to do that, like on a rower or on a row burpee test.
You can get
It's
exposed.
just, like your actual cardiorespiratory system needs to get better to do better at that. And then a Metcon could be like a classic CrossFit thing. I think that kind of simplifies it. It gets the 90% of people that are not really interested in the sport out of the field before you have to start doing complicated gymnastic stuff and doing that. Then I think quarterfinals, I actually think the quarterfinals tests over the last couple of years have been pretty good. I think they've been balanced enough that they give you the right athletes going through. And then I think the semifinals is really just about creating some sort of uniformity. I thought that the complex and the legless were kind of strange tests for those to be the 2 that are like, hey, these are most important from CrossFit, but it is what it is. I'm more so is like, well, why is there not more standardization? Like, you called it, hey, we want to have a repeatable test and we're doing this test, but the 2014 test wasn't the same. The distance run wasn't the same. They didn't move the markers. None of the scores are comparable. And to say that is kind of just like silly.
Yeah.
Then you have them being done at different times. Some people opened with that workout or did it on day 1. Granite Games ended with that workout. Granite Games did it on a turf that had rubber pellets that made it really hard to cut. So it's like, well, these people all look slow when I go and do my data analysis, but I'm like, well, I know they're not. I know that these times are not accurate, because if you lose half a second on every jump cut and acceleration because you're not wearing cleats on that workout versus somebody that's doing it on rubber, you're talking about losing like 5 to 10 seconds just right there.
And not to mention that some people just played the game with the last workout, making sure they didn't blow up. They knew as long as I finished in the top 10, I'd be okay. So you could see some people were pacing it more than if it was the first workout and they had to take some risks.
Yeah. So I wasn't a super fan of that. I feel like that's one easy thing to clean up is like, hey, if you guys are going to give a body of tests that is standard, let's actually make them standard, done as the first event or the first 2 events. And then I think there should be standardization as to like, what are we looking for in the other 4? If we're going to try to get the best people in, are we looking for certain time domains, certain movements that have to get hit?
Or would you rather them all just be the same?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an option too. I like the idea of decentralization because the creation of one of the things I think Dave Castro was kind of a genius at doing was using the landscape. When I went to Aromas and watched how they use that, and I mean, obviously they have resources, so they can do that. They can say, Rogue, we want to set up this massive rig here and do all this shit, which is like, if you don't have that kind of support, then it's harder to do. But using the landscape that is around, I feel like is cool. If you have a mountain, then you want to do a mountain run, cool. I think you should express that. But I think it should be done in the confines of like, okay, well, we want to make sure there's a 20-minute test, a 10-minute test, a 5-minute test, and that like at the minimum, so we're testing all 3 of the time domains that they have in their own education, right? Like this is part of what they preach. It's like, okay, well, if you're not doing anything sub 2 minutes, are we taking out an entire like energy system profile that is just, okay, well, this isn't important to fitness in testing in the sport, but it's part of our ideology that we teach to make you a coach. Like, to me, that's strange.
Yeah.
So I feel like there should be some time domain standardization, and then maybe like movement selection. Like, hey, we want to make sure that these movements are in the tests. I think that would then allow the sport to start having standards that you could like, I've heard people talking about wanting to put it in the Olympics. And I'm like, okay, well, I've been doing CrossFit for over a decade and coaching it. And if you ask me what is CrossFit, I still have a hard time explaining it. So like, oh, what's a sport? And you're like, well, you're kind of weightlifting and powerlifting and running and swimming, because there's no rules. It's never the same. It's changing all the time. And that is a top-down communication issue that has been going on for 15 years. People are blaming what's going on now. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's not like judging and workout organization and all this stuff has been dialed in this sport.
If anything, it's actually improved, but it's just still really bad.
Do you feel like we keep tripping over ourselves a little bit just because we're constantly trying to tie what has become the sport, quote unquote, into the CrossFit methodology, affiliates, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a huge mistake, which is why I think simplifying the testing body,
even just then in your answer right then, you were like, we're not doing these time domains, which is according to how they teach.
Yeah.
Like right there is a perfect example. Yeah. It's like, we're tying it back to this thing over here, when is the sport, should it just be its own thing? I'm asking.
Well, I mean, that's what Glassman was trying to do. And then obviously all this stuff happened, COVID, and then
like a lot of our problems because we're trying to like pigeonhole it back into this thing somehow.
Maybe. I think I would think so. If you just gave me the golden keys of communication to the whole CrossFit community and I could talk to every affiliate owner and I could talk to every person, I would highly encourage that 90% of the community should never be doing some of the stuff that shows up in the sport. Like, I don't think they should be basing their fitness on a lot of that stuff. And it's why we created fitness as a separate product from Compete as part of our TTT athlete programs. Cause it's like, yeah, you can be an athlete. Like, you can have an athletic mindset about becoming fit for the rest of your life, but you don't need to be handstand walking and snatching and doing 15 minutes of them at threshold fatigue to be able to express that. If you look at even just like a triathlete, for example, like, they're generally considered very fit people, but the 25-year-old professional triathlete is not training like they were in their 20s when they're 40. They just have a totally different context of what health training is at that point. I think they could fix that by just making the open more simple. And,
do you think that you can train to compete at the games while also prioritizing like true health, fitness, and longevity?
I think you can in cycles. I think you can keep it in your mind that that's a priority to you. But I think there are sacrifices to your like body and vitality that are made for like any specialization. Like if you, I'm going to go against Mia here and I'm going to talk about golf. But if you talk about somebody that, just for a second, it's like that's a non-threatening sport for a lot of people. You're not going to get hurt. It's just swinging a club and yada. But if you look at the competitors, they're doing 300 swings and rotating left and compressing down laterally to that side. A lot of them have back issues and Achilles issues on one side and knee issues on one side. So anytime you take something to the extreme, I think part of the training process is offsetting that fatigue. So for a golfer, maybe it's rotating in the other direction. Yeah. For a CrossFitter, I think the like in-season preparation is doing your movement work and making sure you're eating and hydrating and limiting your injury risking and sleeping enough. And you're doing all of those things that make it less likely that you're going to wreck yourself. Yeah. But it's still a cost that you're doing. You're still making, like when you're doing 500 contractions a day and 8 hours of physical work, like, that's not something you're going to do forever. There's not going to be people that are like, I've been for the last 40 years training 8 hours a day, doing 3 hard Metcons and doing threshold intervals. Like, you're not doing that unless you got a lot of drugs pumped into your system.
Well,
for
we just
40
saw
years.
that from Sam Briggs. I don't know the actual quote, but she basically said, like, if I could do it, if my body would let me do it for 10 more years, I would do it. But my body's saying no, which is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And it's going to happen to everyone. Like, I don't know if there's anybody out there that's 19 that's like, I'm going to be the person that defies aging and defines by, I'm like, no, you're not. I mean, everybody kind of goes through this similar process of aging, and you have some sort of athletic peak. There's some sort of regression. Things change, priorities change in life. Your biological and hormonal ability to recover from things changes. So I think having the thought process that the sport is going to lead to longevity is silly. And I think that a lot of people are doing their CrossFit training as if they're athletes, even though they're not athletes. They're just like going in and they're like, I got to go as fast as possible today. I'm like, actually, you'd probably be better off like going 3 minutes slower, making sure all your squats hit depth, that your knees don't cave, that you're actually setting up beforehand, and making your technique look good, which, to be fair to CrossFit, it is part of their education. It's like, I forget what it is, mechanics, consistency,
they do a pretty good job in level 1
like
showing the way that you should be moving. And to Chris's point, I think this is where we do need to kind of unhitch the two. The normal class should be teaching more on movement quality and longevity, health, whatever you want to call it. And then those that are, want to be a games athlete, you're still talking about all those things, but obviously, to your point, you have to push the boundaries of the volume and intensity that maybe you can handle. But that kind of goes to another question. So like going to the games now, right? You kind of talked about the open, quarterfinals, semifinals. How important do you think it is to test almost like toughness or like the really grindy, hard, high volume, high intensity workouts where they're just crushed afterwards? Or do you think that we could go another route where it's just we're testing all of these different kind of like testing pieces without killing the people that are there? For example, doing Murph in the middle of 100-degree weather and then doing a clean and jerk after.
I think that it's a cultural decision that they got to make. I think Castro is Castro's a Navy SEAL, and he helped do the training for Navy SEALs. So he brings the military aspect to it, which I think is I think it's an interesting variable of the games, and it's actually something that I enjoy now when I'm in it, because it's very stimulating to try to figure out how do we navigate this, or if somebody's breaking, how do you get them out of it, or am I breaking as a coach? Because it's just a lot of pressure and thinking and time, and it's allowed me to get better as a human in dealing with chaos and adversity. So I like it, but I don't necessarily think that it's necessary if it's a sport. And I also think that the lines of communication, if you're going to have some unknown and unknowable components of testing people's minds, the risk in that is that if people know, because then it's not a psychological trauma to them if somebody's like, oh, well, you've already practiced this workout, or you know the layout of it. And that's kind of one of the problems that I have, is that the lines of communication have never been equitable. There's people that are employed by CrossFit that are also competitors in the sport of CrossFit. It'd be like, being involved in I couldn't even think of a parallel, because every other
Congress
sport,
member that knows what's going to happen.
The bottom line is, like, we know what we've been leaked, and we're on the fringe,
Yeah, like we don't have anybody that is like in a position of major power at CrossFit. And we have found things earlier or had workouts. So if people are practicing these things and they're getting access to them, or they even know the layout, like, hey, it's going to be 15 tests, there's going to be a really early day, like just logistical things that you'd find out from the broadcast, the competitive advantage of that is so high that it completely disrupts whether or not that's a good and productive way to test people's minds. I'm like, okay, well, you're basically like, yeah. I think that would be good. However, if there was a way to make that equitable, that you were sure that people were getting tested psychologically, I do like the idea of there being psychological components to it. Like in the past, I'm like, man, is this like a safety risk that we're doing like Murph in the heat? And there were stupid things there, like the fucking bars were so hot that they were burning people's hands. I don't think we need to go that far to test people, but the idea of being like, okay, we're going to do that, and then you're going to do something super heavy afterwards, I do think that there's a component of fitness that the best people in the world have that allows them, like, in those states of fatigue to do it.
To still do it, yeah.
And I like that. And I think the only place it should happen is at the games. And I think that could be like this, almost the testament to the most exciting parts of the sport. But I think there's a balance to it. And I think right now, like, the unknown, like, for example, the crit. How long was it unknown? How long was the Trek relationship in place? How, like, did people that were in the games have access to the Trek bikes to be able to use them and know their gears and their shifting and know that they were going to be on clip-in shoes where they could practice?
We got a funny story about that.
Yeah, we do actually. Yeah, like, we were trying to hunt it out.
Well, we went to the Trek tour, and then I just straight up asked the guy, and, like, in a sneaky way, I don't even remember how do you remember how I did it?
Yeah, so we went up to Madison that year. I think it was 2018. 2017, 2 weeks early. And we were going to do a training camp up there, get acclimated to the time, the environment. In hindsight, it was a little bit too long, but I think that was the first year it was going to be in Madison.
Yep, first year in Madison.
So I was scouting everything in the area that I thought we could potentially use or would be involved in the tests. And we found did Trek come on as a sponsor? I feel like CrossFit put some.
Who ended up being the actual sponsor?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. CrossFit, I think, put something out that Trek was going to be one of the sponsors. Like Rogue is one of the sponsors. Yeah. So we looked it up, and then we went up to the Trek.
They had a factory or something.
The Trek factory. They're headquartered there, and they'd take you on a tour and show you how they make their bikes and talk about it. So I was like, oh, let's just go up there, because they also had a cyclocross track in the, like, at parking their lot. In their parking lot or on their property. So we go up there, we're going on the tour.
Well, the best part of the tour was before it even started, when you're in the lobby and the guy who doesn't do the tour, or maybe it was the guy who does the tour, but as we're waiting, remember he was telling us he's waiting for the rest of the people to get there, and he's like, all right, I tell you what, over here, if you go across the street.
Was he from the South in Madison, Wisconsin?
He is in my example. He's like, if you ever go to a gas station, show of hands, who goes to the gas station? All right, if you ever go up to one of those bag pickles, you know the bag pickles? If you go turn that around, you're going to see Waterloo, Wisconsin. That's right across the street. That's where they make all the pickles.
We're like, okay.
I mean, he spent a good 5 minutes on these bagged pickles.
Yeah, so we're going on the tour. Chris looks over at this guy, and he's like, hey,
the
tour guide. He's like, got a really nice watch, and, like, just started chatting it up with him.
And I didn't care about that watch. Yeah, I was just buttering him up.
Yeah, he did. He buttered him up. I watched it a couple minutes. We're walking, and then all of a sudden he's like, hey, so you know about that cyclocross race happened with CrossFit or something
I said something where I don't remember what exactly, but I said it as if I already knew it was a thing, just to see how he would respond.
Oh, he said, "Are these the same bikes that?
Are these the same bikes we're using?
Bikes that we're using in the CrossFit race that coming up this weekend?" And the guy's like, "Oh no, it's not these bikes." And he went out. So we didn't get to see what the bikes were, but we confirmed that there were going to be.
We thought it was cool at the
used.
time. But it didn't help at all.
Yeah, it didn't help at all.
No, you're like 3 days out. But can't even practice.
That means that it leaked. Somebody knew that was going to be happening.
Sure. And I got it from Ricky.
It's a huge advantage if you knew 2 weeks ahead of time there's going to be a crit race. And you could get on a bike 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And
we went mountain biking.
Yeah.
That's what we thought it was.
Which is a huge difference. I mean, having somebody next to you like that, the speed at which it's done, having clipped in pedals, like just little details that, again, if you're doing 90% of your training as the shit you know that's going to come out, that 10% is just guesswork. Yeah. But some people might not have to be guessing because of just the way that the whole structure was built.
Yeah. What do you think about new movements coming out, both at the games and then in the open? Do you think, like, we should just say, you know, like these are the boundaries that we're going to set and no new movements are coming out? Or are you cool with, like, you know, a kayak on 1 year and then a bike on another year and all those kind of things?
I like new stuff at the games. I think if the new stuff is going to come out, I think if you're going to showcase athletes, you should give some sort of forewarning, like, hey, this is going to come out in a month. Get practicing. They did it they said paddle was going to come out. Mm-hmm. We did all this prone paddling and it ended up being freaking kayaking. So we were off on it. But again, like, if you're trying to make your athletes look good, these athletes are so adaptive and can learn skills so quickly that I think you would make the races more exciting if you just said, hey, practice this for the next month.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what the test is, but it's going to come. And I think if it's going to happen, it should happen in the games. When it happens in the open or it happens in the quarterfinals, it's a new standard or a new movement. I think it's so stupid because we're not professional judges doing it. It's really hard to judge. Camera angles make the whole online judging process really difficult, and people need to practice movements to make them right. So if you say, okay, well, here's the bar facing burpee, and you've been doing it this way because we set the standard last year as this way, and you've been practicing, and now we're going to change it. But fuck your 50,000 reps of practice. We're going to do it a different way, and you're going to have to remember exactly how to do that under fatigue after you've done 100 of them, and your whole body is in pain and discomfort, and you're going to have to make sure that your habitual way of practicing the sport is all different. It'd be like, hey, we have an NBA game, and then you told everyone right beforehand, like, hey, everybody has to shoot free throws underhand today.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to make them look
changed
stupid.
the rim height.
Yeah, we're going to make them look stupid, and they're not going to make shots, and they're going to make mistakes, and it's going to look like they're cheating the standards. But it's just like, well, no, this is happening because the sport needs to, like, have some sort of a way to explain what the sport is and let people practice it. If it was just a fitness test, then it's like, well, then the movement standard doesn't matter. Just like do it. Like,
Yeah, I know we've talked about that a lot, and I think we are all in agreement that having a standard set of tests and then just like making it clear if you're going to have the unknown and unknowable, at least here's you will be kayaking for a long time. A month out, you better start practicing kind of thing. Makes more sense. And again, like we've talked about this too, but it would make the viewership more enjoyable, not only for those that enjoy the sport, but for those that don't know about it and they finally watch it and then they can realize, wow, how awesome are these guys and girls that are competing.
Yeah. And also there's a weird aspect right now in the sport where there's like an old guard and a new guard, and you can kind of feel it shifting in the athletic population. But I think even in the CrossFit space, you have people that have been employed and kind of came up in the beginning when it was non-structured and growing at a super fast rate and running a different way than most. Like, it was very disruptive to the fitness community, and it was very counterculture, and it was do things a certain way. And there's some beauty to that, and there's some beauty to what happened in the CrossFit games and the frustration of going to those tests, making you come back to them. And now it's like, well, now there's this new guard that's trying to professionalize it, and there's this like war of people that want it to be like it used to be, and then people are like, well, no, we need progress and we need to move forward. And I feel like there needs to be some sort of unified leadership of people that come in from the new guard and explain these are the objectives and what we're trying to do with CrossFit, the ideology, the training, the culture, the sport, whatever. But we can't do it without buy-in from the people that have been doing it for the last 10 or 15 years.
Now that he's back?
I have no idea.
Have they, nothing?
No. Again, another communication thing. But
we know for sure he's back, right?
Yeah, he has a title. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
They announced something.
I find it, I just call bullshit, like corporate bullshit on it. If they don't use him to help as a liaison for the CrossFit Games, I feel like that's one of the dumbest decisions ever.
You think
like,
maybe that was his choice?
Maybe, I don't know, but I know he's doing, they said something with the affiliates in a very unclear way. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't he also be doing something with the sport and explain, like going through his philosophies of how he created tests with the new leadership and being a liaison to those? And I'm not privy to any of the shit that's happening inside.
I wonder if behind the scenes at HQ or whatever they call it now, what is it? It's a different H.
What?
They don't call it HQ. Home office. At home office.
What?
That's what they call it?
To get rid of people saying headquarters?
I thought so. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
Why?
But I wonder if they're like behind the scenes like, oh, this fucking sport. Like,
why do we do that?
No, like in the sense of like, man, we got a lot of problems under the hood and we're having to worry about judging mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, there's also, I think, a real difficult problems to solve because the sport is kind of only profitable because you get free labor. Like
Hiller had a great video on the judge. Did you watch that one?
No.
About paying judges. I was like, oh yeah, that tears the whole thing apart if we want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, which is interesting because I've noticed this. Guido started Wadapalooza, and I saw it evolve year after year, and I was living in Florida So I saw like the earlier ones where it was kind of just like throw down in a park, and then saw it develop into these huge things. And I have a business mind in some capacity. It's not like all I think about, but I'm like, how is this thing profitable? Like, how do they get all these workers to do all this stuff? And I just
nanos.
did like, yeah. And I did,
Free nanos.
I did like per diem rates. I was like, okay, well, let's say you paid them like minimum wage, or you said, hey, we're going to pay you like $50 or $100 a day, and we're going to give you some food and some gear. And you add all that money up for the amount of people that it takes just to judge. And you're talking about taking all of the profitability away, which is strange, because I look at that as like a little, I just don't know if I should say this, but it's kind of like a form of slavery in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean,
like you're doing
these people
all
are
this
volunteering.
volunteer work. Yeah. So, and then they're doing the volunteer work, but then you're putting the pressure on them as if they're supposed to be fucking pros at doing something, which is weird. 'Cause I don't know, that should be another, I think, semifinal discussion, is like, and some of the judges, I have to say, were actually pretty good and were calling no reps more so, but it was also very inconsistent. I know Travis got a ton of no reps on single arm dumbbell overhead squats, and you can go back and look at the live stream, and he's deeper than a ton of people that are just fucking going up and down, not even close to depth. Like, there are some videos at like some people in that field that look like they were like push pressing their wall balls and barely squatting to depth. And I'm like, well, that's an issue. It's like, the issue is not that Travis is getting no reps. Like, I don't really care about that. I actually rather him be getting no reps, but it's like, if you're going to apply it that tightly, or you have one guy who's like, you know, he was a judge of the games and he's a level 4 coach and he's really a stickler, and then you have 9 other people that aren't doing it, then it's like, well, now the validity of the sport's like not right. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked in circles on that, and I feel like it's just impossible without having paid judges that go around.
But then I feel like that's the thread that pulls it all apart.
Sure.
Because I don't think they're in a position or will be in a position to be able to afford that.
Yes,
So
well, that's the thing. Logistical solution could be that you create the tests that don't require so much judging. I mean, you could run a fitness test that's like, hey, you're going to have a head judge walking here that is behind you on rowers. Everybody's going to be set to countdown. You can't get off the rower until it's at 0. If you do, there's a 20-second penalty just to ensure that nobody cuts the line. Like, there's things in semifinals that there's like the standby beep. And there was an interval workout in Lowlands where like 4 people were coming off the line so clearly ahead of the beep. And if you're in the Olympics and you do that and you come off the line ahead of the beep, you can get withdrawn from the competition. Here, it's like, oh, no big deal. I'm like, that's 2 seconds. It's like a whole extra burpee in an interval workout. Why are we not enforcing something super basic? Like, you can't come up. No changes or anything. I never brought that up to anyone, but having the conversation now is making me a little bit fired up that, again, you could just create the test where it's like, hey, do a row here, pick this sandbag up. It's got to be off the floor with your feet over the line over here. You got to run all the way across the other side of the line, all the way back, do a row. And you could have one camera that's like a review that just shows that everyone's feet comes across the line. It's like, well, if your feet didn't come across the line, there's a standardized penalty that's 10 or 15 seconds. So you could then reduce the judging by, like, if you need 40 judges to go through 4 heats, you might need 4 judges to go through 4 heats. So you could create logistic solutions to limit
that camera angle. Remember, I sent you the
We
were at what was it, Mac and Syndicate, and there was the main camera angle that looks down. It's positioned right behind the finish line, is looking down on the field. Well, on that upper railing, they had like tied to. Did I already say this on a podcast?
I don't think so.
But they had tied or locked in on the rail, like a GoPro, essentially. It wasn't a GoPro, but kind of like a small action camera. And if you watch the feeds of any event for the last few years, it's the shot that they use between events, between heats. They'll just go to a shot of the whole venue, and they'll say, coming up next, men's heat number 3 or whatever, or they'll do a sponsors. And so that's the shot, and you see the whole field. And I saw that camera sitting there, and I was like, oh, my God, this is the thing we're always talking about on the show. Like, why don't they just have that shot? You know, and I even texted someone that who works with HQ, like, is that feed recording the whole time? And they're like, yeah, we have it. I'm like, two options. One I've mentioned here is like, why don't you just charge people $10 to watch that? Because if you had a family or friend, you would want to see them because you're only going to see Mal O'Brien all day. So you would probably pay for that. That's a good new revenue stream for CrossFit. And y'all never get to do video review on your day. And then now you're bringing up judging points. It's like, well, if you had that feed, maybe you could do different things with it.
Yeah, I would pay $10.
Why do you think they don't show that if
I
they
don't
have
know.
it?
Well, I was thinking
prior when we've talked about
Yeah.
it, we didn't know they had it. And now confirmed, it's there, it's recording, they have all that footage. Why don't you think they use it?
Yeah, so I'm not really a fan viewer of CrossFit. I view CrossFit, the sport, from the sidelines. Like, I don't really do that much video review unless it's training video review. And most of the time I'm watching a CrossFit event. If it's like, if it was a regional or something like that, I would only really be concerned about the leader pace, because I'm using the leader pace to try to build my models of saying like, okay, well, this is how fast you're going to have to do it. But this past weekend, I watched Atlas and
Corpus.
And Corpus didn't have good footage and ability to watch that one at all, but strength and depth. So I watched those two without really any horses in the race, and I was really just trying to watch the race. So I watched the workout, and they primarily focus on the leader, but I was watching one workout in particular where somebody was out in the lead that I actually knew who the athlete was, and maybe it's just because that athlete specifically is not liked or whatever, but they were out in the lead and they were filming the number 2 person. I'm like, that's strange. Why is the person in second place being filmed and we're not watching the leader? Was it real
quickly?
No. It was like it was a 10-minute time cap workout, and it was like the whole first 3 minutes of the workout, they had the camera exclusively held. 3 minutes might be an exaggeration.
Sure, but it wasn't like a quick
substantial period of time where the second place person in the heat was getting the full camera view, and the people weren't talking at all about where the lead pace was. So I'm like, this is really strange. So that was one thing. And then the second was somebody finished the workout. They finished the workout in second because the leader had been going, and they're like, oh my God. And right before that, somebody else came in. And I'm like, why didn't you show that someone coming in? Then after the workouts are done, they're panned on watching somebody in a post-Metcon fatigue state, breathing heavy
in the
for
crowd.
20 or 30 seconds. I'm like, what the fuck? How are you ever? It'd be like going to a basketball game and being like, oh, LeBron James just went out of bounds. We're just going to keep watching him. Yeah. But like the whole game's playing over here. I think part of the issue is that we have these superstars and the sport is being broadcast from like right up their ass cracks, like literally it's way too close.
At what point when you said that did you know you were going cracks?
Crack as opposed to what, instead of hole or something?
I mean, there was a lot of options. It just seemed like there was a stutter there.
Well, but that's why a wider screen makes sense.
I think a wider screen where you can actually observe the race.
But I'm giving them a revenue stream idea.
I agree. I would pay $10.
I think a lot of people would pay $5 or $10 just to watch that.
Yeah, but I think you're going to get people that act like, if you watch a sport like let's say you watch the Olympic 100-meter sprint, or you watch the Michael Phelps go for his like
1 millionth gold.
1 millionth gold medal. You're watching a race. A race is exciting because you're watching the race. You're watching where they are, where the other people are, how far ahead they are after each split. When you're watching a CrossFit feed, you're essentially watching the leader or most popular people being fluffed by the commentators. And I get it. Like, if Noble's a main sponsor and they want their athlete in there, there's going to be no incentive other than like, if they're anywhere close to the lead, show them. But it's bad for building a fan base to actually watch a racing sport and understand a racing sport. You should never watch the final heat of a workout and not see first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th go through the finish line.
Right.
Like, and you should know where they are. And I think part of that is like, somebody's got to figure out how to broadcast to make CrossFit understandable to the non-CrossFitter. Because right now it's like, oh, I'm just watching these big, strong, sexy, fit people breathe from really up close, but I have no idea what's going on.
All I could think about was you when you were saying big, strong, and
doing
sexy.
That, shirt off, huffing and puffing.
One of the things that other sports have done now, like if you watch, let's say, the college football national championship, you can go on ESPN and they'll have 3 or 4 views. So they actually now
But they do it
like,
the opposite. the main feed
The main
is the
feed,
wide.
yes.
And then if you want those cooler, interesting.
Exactly.
But that CrossFit needs the main feed.
And then
if you want to
have
watch
3 or 4 other options.
And I think the other options, I think you could then get more creative. Like if you know that Tia or Brooke or Danielle Brandon or whoever the famous people that are going to be crushing it, you know that their fan bases are so big that there's a huge portion of the market that just watches them.
Yeah.
You could get creative and maybe even give another revenue opportunity where it's
yeah,
like,
do it that way.
hey, you're going to be on them no matter where they are in the race. You're just going to watch
No
them
Bull
the
Cam
whole.
presents-
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then that way it's like, all right, well, no one then gives a shit. Just show it, and the people that are going to watch it are going to do it. And maybe you could even have it as a picture-in-picture. But if you're going to create a broadcast for a sport, I think that we need to be understanding like actually what's happening in the sport, which I from my limited experience watching broadcasts, because I don't do it that much. I actually just am there. Yeah. I feel like it was impossible to follow, and I know the sport pretty well. And I was like, fuck, I can't believe I just watched the final heat and I have no idea where anybody finished except first place, fourth place, and then the person that was on the field at the end in 10th. And you're just like waiting to know, like waiting till they put up that little thing that has first in the heat, second in the heat with all the times. I'm like, that's crazy that I just literally watched it live and then have to wait for them to report their scores afterwards.
Yeah, I think a multiple feed concept makes sense, and then again, you could charge
Nike
for
presents the Watch Matt Frazier sit in the crowd cam.
Yeah.
They did get a lot of.
There was so much
lot
footage
talk.
of like even they would just cut 2. It's like
Yeah,
the game's still playing.
yeah. I mean, it's a weird cultural thing. I think in CrossFit is that we have a lot of obsession on that, on a couple superstars as opposed to the sport. The
Look, I give
sport
Tia and
hasn't
Matt
been-
a pass. But if you zoom, I mean,
But still, I mean, if
I
you-
still would rather
so,
them
like-
not on there. But like if there was a Bulls game and Jordan's in the crowd, I would assume at some point he's going to be put on the monitor.
Yeah,
I think they
but
did it too much.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. Yeah. I mean, Michael Jordan, if he's at what does he own? The Hornets?
Yeah.
No, he owns the horn. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What you said? Yeah.
If he's at a Hornets game, they're going to pan over to him and be like, oh, here's MJ in the crowd doing his thing.
it's going to be
But-
during a timeout.
Yeah, it's not going to be like, oh, okay, there's
Middle of the game.
yeah, this is the fourth quarter. There's 1 minute left.
LaMelo
It's
steals
like,
the ball.
Oh my
He's
god,
going down the lane. Let's pan to Jordan.
Yeah, here's MJ yelling at people. Yeah, so I think there's
Good point, good
yeah,
point.
I think there needs to be. I think that all circles back to defining the sport. What are the parameters of the sport? What are exciting tests? What are people going to watch? How are we going to get it out to the fans? I don't know what these discussions are right now. I don't know if the new leadership had time to have these discussions or if it was kind of just like, well, we're in COVID now, like figure it out. But I
Man.
think these are the problems that you need to solve. Otherwise, I think we just all agree that CrossFit's not really ever going to be a mainstream big sport. You'll have a couple people, maybe the 5 most dominant men, women, and teams that can make a huge, substantial amount of money because they're going to get all the visibility, but you're not going to really have a comprehensive and deep field that has earning opportunities and a fan base that's excited and following people and underdogs. Like a lot of people watching CrossFit are personally tied to the people in the field. Like, you know, somebody from a gym in Canada is going to the Atlas games and all of the 100 or 120 people in that gym want to watch that person. But if they finish 7th in the heat and they can't go and watch in person, they're going to watch the live broadcast and that person's literally not even going to be on the feed other than the like in lane 7 Joe Canada.
Great name. Yeah, I just really
Have I ranted too much this episode?
little
Was
bit,
that
no.
this
It's
perfect
good, it's
where it
good.
was? Yeah.
We're
I
fine.
really do wonder what problems there are, if any, at HQ that nothing has been done over the last 2 years as this new leadership has come in to help either the gym side of things during COVID, because I heard some statistics when I was at Syndicate that blew my mind.
Let's hear 'em.
I don't remember the actual numbers, but like
They blew his mind out.
well,
and
a
his memory.
Just a basic conversation with someone that
It exploded my
I
memory.
have too many concussions from football. I can't remember anything.
It's okay. Give us the gist.
Basically, the the actual profitability of gyms is, like less than
So
10%. And those that are owning gyms are making like less than $10,000 a year. It's like, how can you run a business where you're only bringing in less than $10,000 a year, especially now in an economy where inflation's at 8.6% and gas is $5 a gallon? Like, gyms are going to start closing unless CrossFit steps in and comes up with new systems that allow people to become profitable. And it's not all on them. The way that they have it structured is for the gym to be autonomous. And I appreciate that. And I think that was kind of Glassman's original idea of creating the system. But if you have to pay into this quote unquote system of CrossFit, then they should be aiding in your success.
Maybe that's what Castro's doing.
Yeah.
Because again, that for them, or for CrossFit, that is actually probably much more important to them than the sport. Yeah. Like in terms of just revenue, like as a business line, it's like, well, that's what they did and what they do and their education.
That's why I wonder if over there they're like, when people are talking about fucking no reps, they're like, guys, y'all should just be thankful we have a fucking sport. We're drowning over here. Shut your fucking mouth.
But the thing is that the reason that most people come into the gym is because of the sport. Like it's still
all twisted and weird.
It's like spaghetti, right? It's all mixed together, and you can't untangle those things at this point. And so
I can untangle spaghetti one at a time, like Lady in the Tramp.
Can we do it together?
Little kiss on the camera.
I mean, whatever. If you don't like the analogy, screw you, Chris. But you
I thought that was like like he was endearing. Like, I want to see that.
I like a good marinara sauce.
Man, me too. You know what's funny? We went out to eat a couple of days ago, and Jordan was eating the marinara, and she's like, "I love this sauce," but she hates tomatoes. I'm like, it's.
I don't eat regular
tomatoes.
Get
it. Like, do you not like tomatoes either?
No. Ketchup and tomato sauce, I love. But
that is so strange.
But I always take tomatoes off.
Well, I think part of it is the texture. It feels so strange and
goopy,
goopy and
like if
poppy.
it was like a bell pepper, I think I'd be more down. Like if it had a little crunch crisp to it.
Yeah. But when you blend it, I think it gets the grossness of the like.
And you just made it. You made it bad for me.
Now everyone when they eat it.
What's y'all's favorite marinara sauce from the big three pizza places? Papa John's, Pizza Hut, or Domino's? Favorite sauce?
Papa J's.
Papa J's, lame.
I actually think Domino's. I think I like Domino's.
Domino's new one's pretty good.
Yeah, I like Domino's pizza better than Papa John's.
You know who has a good marinara? Little Caesars.
Yeah,
man.
I mean $5, you can't go wrong.
I started intermittent fasting a couple weeks ago because I was like, my training during this time is so bad and I don't want to stop eating nice things for dinner. I'd rather just like figure out how to cut calories, cut out breakfast. Yeah. People be like, are you doing this for your hormones? I'm like, no, this is like a lazy form of calorie maintenance without measuring. But I'm so hungry right now. And you said pizza sauce and like, I felt my stomach be like, feed me.
It's talking to you. All right, we got to take a break. We're going to go get some food.
I thought you were serious.
Anyhow, going back to it, I do think that CrossFit could help with that. But the tie to this is they also need to promote the sport so that as it grows, there is more media coverage. Like if you have CBS sign on and then all of a sudden it's on the actual CBS instead of CBS Sports, more people are seeing it, more viewers see it, and then more people are interested in going into the gyms.
Yeah, but I think you got to make it good because if you put it on mainstream TV and it sucks, no one's going to watch it.
I agree.
And
the same problems at the games is it's one person.
Yeah. Also, like I think televising the kayak event at the games is like, oh, here's
bad.
Look how slowly they're moving across the water. I'm like, well, who is that? It's like you can't see who they are. I'm like, well, let's just not live broadcast that one. Why don't we film it ahead of time and then go in and put infographics on it and be like, here's the race. He's this far behind.
What they do. That's what I keep trying to interrupt with. I think the thing that ends up on ESPN is an edited package, right?
It's
not the live.
The edited package that still showed people falling over on and freestanding handstand push-ups the whole time.
Live, right?
I actually texted you this, that I think that in order to create the sport more viewer friendly, I think that they should, and this might lower the cost and make these more profitable, they should maybe get rid of live commentary over CrossFit and just only like do it post.
Figure out what happened afterwards.
Yes, do it post edited. Then you could say, hey, here's some. Yeah, for sure. Somebody from the first heat set this time. This is what it looked like.
You have all the information to properly, because for the people actually in the booth, I don't know who's doing it right now, but I mean, I don't hold it against them all the time, because it's like, I'm sure there's a lot to.
It's so
especially
hard
if you only have.
I mean, we've done it enough. It's very challenging, and we're doing it on 1 or 2 people, and it's happening, especially like a fast workout. You get one thought out, and you're already like, well, fuck, they're a third of the way through the workout.
Your solution would fix that. Like, okay, now you know all the stories that, like Jake Berman sneaking in before Noah on that. What was that?
Yeah, on the burpee
workout.
one.
Yeah.
It's like you would be able to tell that story properly on the.
And you'd have footage of it to be able to show. And I think if you did that, you'd lower the cost of putting on an event, because you wouldn't need to hire a whole broadcast team, announcers, whatever. And I think you could maybe make it more expensive for people to come in and watch it in person, because it's the only time you're going to see it live. And then there's a post-production, like, here was the event, here's what happened.
Someone, was it one of you guys, or maybe another photographer I bumped into during the past few weeks, had the idea of, or made the comment like, it would be interesting if we just stopped selling these as like live things, and the only people there were athletes, coaches, and staff. Yeah. And it wasn't even you can't have other people.
At some point, it needs to be a live event, because that's just where sport is, right? Like, you think you go to an NFL game not just to watch the football players on the field, but to enjoy the atmosphere. Yeah. It's just CrossFit doesn't have that. Even at the games, it's just not that special right now, because they can't get
the games though.
The Coliseum,
good. Yeah.
But some of the field events are
like
pretty weak.
You can't even get to them,
right? Yeah. Or like the Masters divisions, there's only 150 people out there watching it, and maybe that's always going to be the case.
But like, how many people are at the Masters PGA Championship watching versus the normal one? Yeah, probably not the same.
Certainly not. Yeah. But the other piece of the puzzle here is, if you have a good production and you can sell the TV rights to, let's say, a CBS or an ESPN like they have in the past for good money, then you take care of that issue of not having money to pay judges.
I mean, they could obviously monetize it through Netflix and making a documentary out of it, and I think that'd be
they just put out the new trailer, and it's great because I got advertised. I clicked on it, and I got an ad for a real movie trailer called Beast, I think, with Idris Elba. Something had like tigers or animals like lashing out, and I don't know, but it had all those same like Michael Bay zoom, zoom. And I was like, oh, I know when I'm finally gonna skip this ad and get to the CrossFit thing, it's gonna be zoom, zoom. I feel like every documentary for the last 20 years in CrossFit has been zoom, zoom, zoom. Like zooming into the venue, zoom. Lifting a power clean, zoom.
I never noticed things like that when I watch it, but then he pointed it out, and I was like, oh, this is a lot of dramatic music for...
I'll give him this. At least it's the games. Sometimes I'd be watching these fucking edited videos, and it's like an Idle Tuesday power clean, and it's like, can we stop? Can we move past whatever this trend is? Yeah. But hashtag rant.
Yeah. This is going to be the episode title is going to be 3 dudes ranting on CrossFit. Now, I think that if you creatively thought about, hey, we're going to literally restructure the sport. We're going to commit to the restructure. We're going to get the most important people in the community, the highest profile athletes, the highest profile coaches, anybody that's been involved in the judging game or putting on competitions at a local, regional, or global level. Anybody who's left from the games team that originally put on the games, I'd say through the
Andrew Hiller.
Yeah. From like maybe 15 through 18, like those years where they actually had the resources and it was growing and like figure out what was working, what were the issues, what's preventing us from growing this, what's preventing us from growing an audience base, why, like, does it. For example, I went to Lowlands, and the environment was awesome. They had 2 competition floors that were for a community event, the main competition floor. The venue was this huge, big, open-air convention center that looked like an airplane hangar in Amsterdam, which is a awesome place to visit and a great tourist destination, and like really, really, really nice environment that was full of people and super loud and screaming. Then I went to Mac, and the competition was awesome. It was super well run. Everything was good, but there was basically
dead.
No one in the stands.
the warm-up area in the was like basically underground, like in a dungeon. And I'm like, all right, well, do we
What do
need
you got against dungeons, bro?
I was just thinking, like, do we need this? Like, should we just have like one big in-person thing in a big high destination place in North America that's like, hey, this is semifinals. Like, it's a bigger field, it's a different style of test. It's not going to be put on with the same production value, and that qualifies you to the CrossFit Games. And if you did that, maybe you could reduce the amount of semifinals down a lot. You could make the testing a little bit more simple so you didn't need judges. Maybe you don't even need to sell spectator tickets and you just do it. And then you put all of the revenue baskets into like make money on the games and the registration for open quarterfinals, and don't, because I would think, I don't know for sure, I haven't seen the financials. I would think that it was hard to make a profitable semifinal.
Yeah.
I think based on just, there's not that many people. And also Knoxville, Tennessee, like of all the places in the US that you might just get people to be like, oh, I want to take a trip there, like from a different place. I just don't think people would want to go to Knoxville.
I don't know. Those scooter rides were fun, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a really nice city. It's really beautiful.
And I did like Knoxville, but your point's right. Like, I don't think many people are thinking, oh, hell yeah, let's go.
Flying in there is not easy either.
And I know a lot of people that watch CrossFit. If they go to a CrossFit competition, they're like, okay, what time is Sally's heat time? She's going at 2 and 5.
Right.
I'm going to go to the beach from 9 until 12, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to hang there from 2 to 5. And then when they're done,
And then
I'm going to go to the movies
back
later.
To Heat 5 because this beach is fucking sweet.
Yeah. But they're not staying for the whole thing because it's hard to be in those venues. Like, I'm burnt out just from being in there watching. And you're watching.
They're not very fun.
Yeah, and if the event's boring,
Which is fine if that's how it's going to be, I guess. But
yeah, but I
it's
think
not
that's
fun for the audience.
But that's not going to grow the sport. I don't think it's.
Well, I
fun.
asked
think
Brandon when we were
should
at
change
Syndicate, could you make a test of fitness that was actually fun to watch?
I think it would have to. Yes, I think you could. I think the CrossFit Games has done.
They do a
that.
pretty good
There's
job.
been some pretty good
Here's
fun races.
why, though.
The end of the
Because
MAC
it's the
was
best.
good.
Yeah.
The last event.
But here's the thing still. When you have the gap that we started this conversation with, and there are people that are 3 minutes behind in a workout, that's when it's not enjoyable. The first heat is not as enjoyable as the last heat because it doesn't matter as much. And the same thing is true. Like, why is viewership up in the NFL during the playoffs or the NBA during the playoffs? And it's because those games matter.
Should we get rid of these first heats?
I don't know if it's getting rid of the first heats or as much as it's just like if you do have a live competition or you do have something that's aired, it has to be just the best, right?
I know that people probably wouldn't like this based on how the cuts were received, but I'd love if you could say there's a quarterfinals that is like, or like one open test that leads into 2 quarterfinals tests. That's just one competition that sources people up to like top 200 in North America or whatever. Then you show up to the CrossFit Games as there's no semifinal, there's no nothing, but day 1 and day 2 is like 6 fitness tests that's sourced down to the top 30 or the top 40, whatever you want your field to be. Then a 2-day break, and then the spectacle starts on, Friday, Saturday, Sunday with only the best.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be
I love that.
Yeah, just something like that. I think logistically, cost-wise, you'd have all of your resources put on one big test that you could plan all year. You wouldn't
You could focus in on the people you want to, and you can make names and start to learn who you want to follow.
The CrossFit Games season is so long for no reason. Like the sourcing of people going from the basically 5 weeks, or for a Masters athlete, it's if you take the open test, then there was 5-week gap before the Masters. So you're talking about like a 2-month window to just qualify for a thing. And I'm like, why? Like, just make it a 1 weekend thing with 3 tests then. Like, why do we need to fucking draw it out and make the whole community focus for 2 months on this impending date that just really doesn't do anything to differentiate fitness? If you just say like, okay, well, it's a fitness test, we're going to run it over 3 days and we're going to give you all your tests and you'll be done with it. And then that could just maybe source it into the finals.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, I think part of it is they want a season. They want to have what the other sports have, which is here's a 6-month season or a 4-month season, whatever it's going to be. And that keeps attention on the sport. The problem, though, is that it's not interesting enough to keep attention on it for that long. And then most people are just kind of cut out. So now it's like, oh, I'm in my off season after 2 weeks.
What about a solution to that, you bring back those semifinal or sanctional competitions. Anybody who wins one, automatic bid through the first 2 days of the CrossFit, and you get into the, you already passed the cut line. If you're the champ from that year, you automatically pass the cut line. So then you also have incentive to do those. You're like, oh, I could go to the games and not have to. So I think like there's solutions and there's new ways of doing things. But I think a lot of the big problem is that people are just tied the way that it's done. Yeah. Like, and they're tied to the movements. Like there was like, if just imagine somebody said, Mike had actually brought this up. He's like, I think that it might just be like the squat is just too hard to judge its speed. Like it's just a dumb movement to put. And I'm like, man,
for Metcons and stuff.
Yeah. For Metcons. Yeah. I'm like, could you imagine you went out and you had to get in front of a group of, say, anybody that's a level 2, level 3, or level 4 CrossFitter that's into the sport, and you had to make the argument that squatting should not be part of a fitness test? You'd get shit on. You'd have people like throwing dirt,
I would disagree with them.
I'm not sure I agree with him, but I'm just saying like
it does cause a lot of headaches.
That is one of the reasons why it's going to be hard to make change, is because people have these very, very, very strong beliefs about how things should be done based on how they were done, without acknowledging that like there were always these problems. And now these problems are just brewing to the point that they're preventing growth, because in the beginning they weren't preventing growth because it was just like a beautiful storm. It was like you have enough media, you have enough superstar power. The superstars are crushing it.
We need a different division of, so if we have elites and we have RX, we need a professional RX division that can kind of be run like NASCAR has the Cup Series and the Xfinity, which is the one below.
Yeah.
And Xfinity is where you run all your tests on new changes you want to try.
Yeah.
So you don't have to try it on the big guys, and then you could practice them in a real environment, and then see what works and what didn't and move it up.
Yeah, I've been
because the gap, like y'all mentioned when we started, is like, why are those people competing
the
in the same
just
sport?
Not deep enough right now for it to be as realistic as it needs to be.
It could be fixed with different tests.
Yes.
The gaps, I could close the gaps with a bubble person and Travis as an example by making the tests appropriate. But if you make the test and you're like, hey, we're going to make this as a games test, and it's going to have 45 muscle ups of volume, and it's going to have 225-pound squat snatches, that's going to create that separation gap super visible. But if you make the test and it's like 1K row into double unders into toes to bar, it's like, all right, well, now the margin for error, even in an RX athlete versus a games athlete, is going to be a lot tighter because the skill gap isn't getting exposed. So you could...
But don't we want that skill gap? Like we need that
you
to some
just
degree.
Argued against it because it makes viewing the sport so boring.
That's the problem. Is I tend to agree with like that whole like let's bring everyone and just cut it down real fast, because then you do get the best and they can do everything. I still don't think that there should be like these. It shouldn't be Murph in the middle of the day because it's just not enjoyable to watch and people are suffering.
Yeah,
and it kind of goes all the way back to that whole psychological thing. So maybe we need some of that, but. My argument is just let's not showcase the people that don't have the skills at the games. Like narrow it down to the best of the best, and then showcase them so that the sport can grow.
What about at semifinals? Because that was hard. Yeah. Watching 30-minute heat workouts.
Jesus.
For 6 straight, so 3 male heats, 3 female heats is. And some of them was like
enough free yerbays in the building,
and some of them were like, so it's a 30-minute workout, and you're chucking your, and they're pushing a tank that moves at the same speed for 15 of those minutes, and you're just like, am I really sitting here watching them? And I have no idea where
you start judging if you like that friend that much. Like, what do I really like them? Do I want to be?
Do I want to coach anymore? And like, you're then losing sight of like, I don't know who's in the lead or who's where or like what is going on right now. I'm like,
can I switch this question? You mentioned about setting up the season. I was wondering from a coaching perspective, with y'all doing TTT compete and then your individual clients, how would you like the season to be set up? Is this screwing you guys in some way?
I think that if you could condense, do you have an answer?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me preface that. I know your answer is like, well, we just deal with what is done.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I've been coaching.
Yeah.
But I think if I could build it, I would say make the qualification process shorter. Because you also, if you want this sport to develop, you do need local competitions and you need feeder programs and you need whatever. But you basically say like, okay, well, from February to May, if you throw a competition, most recreational people are now not going to participate now. It's like you're taking out a big portion of the spring, which is a good time because a lot of people use outdoor venues. And it's like, well, that should just be condensed and pull it down. And then that opens up more off-season things. And I think there was something to that whole sanctional format where CrossFit, I don't know how much they were actually involved, but they were supposed to be involved. I think it would be cool to create some sort of licensing or tour-based system with all these. There's these competitions that have been running for years that are really good. Like the MAC has been going on for such a long time.
Yeah.
It started as a team competition, I think, as just like a team community competition. And I'm like, man, that's interesting. They have all this like experience and wisdom about how to create a community event and get teams in and have logistics. And then they don't even get to display it and they don't get to do it and make money doing it because they're hosting an event that has no fans, that nobody is there for. So they're like hosting this unprofitable thing and getting shit on about how it's run and how it's the professionalism. I'm like, man, that makes it really hard to want to grow the sport. Like, who wants to be in the position to be like, I got to turn this ship around without a lot of logistical support to do it? So
it's funny you say that because Mac what year was it in DC that we went up, Chris?
That would have
2000.
been
that was sanctional.
Sanctionals. Was it 19?
That was Alexis's first.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the Alexis podcast. That year, it was actually pretty full. It was at some, arena in D.C.
It was pretty packed.
They had a good environment. And then this year, at a semifinal, where you had to qualify in through this whole CrossFit system, I mean, at Syndicate, there maybe were 200 people in the crowd.
But how much of that is just being in D.C.?
Versus Knoxville?
Let's say you took a 50-mile radius of DC, so that's like an hour drive within, and you just said, what's the total number of bodies in there or the total number of CrossFit gyms that's within a reasonable amount of distance? Is like, that's your fan base.
Right.
So like, if it's a 1 hour drive and you get to go watch it and then you get to drive home, you'll probably do it. If you do that same thing in Knoxville, I don't know for sure, but if you're like 20 minutes outside of Knoxville, it looks like the country.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's not a lot of like driving population density to come to there. So I don't know. The benefit is that the cost of doing it there in the Civic Center was probably reasonable
Much
for
less.
them to put it on.
Sure.
But the downside is, well, then you can't actually turn it into this growth and profitability system. So I don't know, man. Circling back to the answer to your question,
I was gonna say,
condense the open and maybe combine the open and quarterfinals and make it super low stress for competitors. So that way they don't need to waste.
how long would
2
you like
months of
their
their
off
year.
season to be, ideally?
Well, I think as a professional athlete in any sport, you don't really ever get an off season. Like you get to a point where
I guess I mean non-competing.
times, I think there should be competitive opportunities throughout the year all the time. And then athletes build their own off seasons.
But it's voluntary.
It's
Yeah.
voluntary,
Yeah.
not like where
I
it's
guess
a
I would count that
mandatory.
as different.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only like thing that they should really be mandated to do for the sport is whatever the qualifiers for the games are in the games, and then everything else should be kind of optional. And then that allows you to like have a lot more. I remember 5 years ago, we would wait to do all of our planning, all of our athlete camps, all of our program design until we got the schedule from the games, which usually came out like a day before the open. No, it came out like 2 months before the open. And sometimes it would be like, hey, here are the open dates. And then you're like, okay. And then you're waiting until you're almost in the open. Is like, okay, here's the semifinal dates. So if you're a business out there that's running a CrossFit competition, you're just waiting for all of that to know, okay, I can do this. And that makes it hard to rent places and venues. And so I think number one change is just communication. I think that would be my vote if I could do it. It's just like, let's communicate the process and how it works.
Yeah, I would love to know what's going on with the communication between, whatever this athletes union thing is now and CrossFit. And
but now there's another
Is
athlete.
Travis in that or Noah? Or any of our people in that?
I don't
we got
think
some
so.
insight? No?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
they
just
were involved in those initial conversations. I've actually had some conversations with Fikowski, who I think is the president of it or runs it. and he's got a lot of good ideas. And I've read through some of them. Like he has a whole thing about standardization of competitions based on games history. He has movement standards. Like he has a lot of stuff, but I don't know where it goes and who reads it. And I know that a lot of it is not implemented because I've read it. And then I've been to the competitions after that. I'm like, well, this stuff is obviously not being implemented.
Well, he called out CrossFit for the bar height. I don't know if you saw that last week. Whoever the guy was, it's like super tall.
It was 2 weeks in a row.
DeLugos.
2 weeks in a row, yeah.
And
That's
I talked to him about it while I was there. And I didn't even know that was a thing. I just looked at the pull-up bar and I watched Travis jump up to it. Travis is like 5'11" or 5'10". He's pretty close to my height, and he was hanging and his feet were like this far above it. I'm like,
Lugos couldn't do a butterfly.
Yeah, well, neither could Brent. He kind of had to like bend his knees and change the way he did it,
which is not easy to do. That's challenging.
Ahead of the competition, I guess he had done research and talked to people that were tall in the sport, which is not a huge number of them, and said, hey, these are the recommended bar heights, and they were just like, no, we're not going to do that. Just, I think another why?
Yeah, that's a fail on CrossFit's part. But I mean, again, if they choose to grow the sport, they will have to start listening. Or maybe it is what Chris said, where it's just like, hey, we got all these other problems. We're not even worried about it. You guys just keep kind of running the sport.
Yeah.
But
I also wonder if when we look at the heyday, right, you look at I'd say it's 2012, 2013, 2014 is like the peak years.
I think 18 really was the peak in terms of the
So let's extend it 2012 to
2018.
2018. I wonder if you looked at that time, if you would look under the hood and be like, you'd find that it was being propped up artificially, so to speak. Kind of like you would look to someone who is ripped on the front cover of a fitness mag and you would be like, wow, look what they did. But if you followed them 2 weeks later, you'd see they're puffy again. That was all water dehydration and they'd been, you know what I'm saying? They didn't really have that look, but you assumed that's just how they look all the time. I wonder
because
if
it was so big and
I wonder if we looked under the hood of CrossFit during those peak years, if we'd be like, oh, we should just be thankful we even had those because it was kind of artificial the whole time.
It's possible.
Yeah. Either way, it was growing, so they need to look back and see what they can do to replicate that. But then also, I mean, it is with every sport, there has to be feedback from the people that are doing it and the fans. Because at the end of the day, it's not even what the people that are doing it are worried about. It's the fans, the viewership, if you want to grow something. If it's just going to be like this, homegrown thing that it has been, then who cares, right?
I think of it now when I watch the whole sport and the way that I've done it, it's almost like a famous person showcase. Like there's a couple people that are so fit and so well compensated and are such good performers under pressure that they are being showcased as a display of the sport. We're making movies, but the movie is not really about the sport. When you watch the Netflix thing, it's like the movie is about
Matt Fraser,
3 people and all of any side story that you need to tell to create a little bit of color, but you don't know there were years where people that were on the podium in the sport literally weren't even displayed in the movies. And I'm like, well, you're not talking about the sport now. You're talking about a person.
Yeah. I don't know why it bugged me so much. What was it? Mac Yeah. And it was like, they had 2 new girls had just got their qualification. Help me with their names.
Rebecca Fuselier
and
I forgot who the other one was.
Well, see, this is the point. We're terrible too. But they just freaking got their first spot. Danielle Brandon just won, right?
Yeah.
She won that one. And then the first interview off the floor, which changed the whole template for the week. Every time there was an interview, it was you won your heat or you won the whole workout. And then they changed their template out of nowhere to interview Brooke Wells.
Yeah.
I'm like, what about these people?
Yeah. I thought that was strange. And
like it's just,
Again, I think athlete showcase. It's like she's a noble athlete. It is a good story.
It's a great story.
Super impressive.
Have that on the internet some other day.
Yes, and not like, I think it kind of like takes away your thunder if you're like, all right, this is a competition and Danielle Brandon just came out.
And I'm sure Danielle Brandon doesn't care.
Yeah,
or maybe if she does, she's not going to say it.
Yeah, it's not her complaint.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting that you just walk off the floor after crushing it. You just won, and it's like, hold on.
Let's listen to a 5-minute cry fest with her.
Like to some degree, though, I really do understand it because they do the same thing in other sports. You think about like going to the golf example, Tiger played a couple of weeks ago in the PGA Championship and he sucked, but they still were all focused on him, even though these other guys were playing so well.
When Brooke Wells is fucking Tiger Woods, I agree.
Hold on,
You're right.
But if you circle it back to that, even that example, the last person who won it, Rory McIlroy?
This year was Justin Thomas.
Okay, Justin Thomas sinks his last putt on 18, just secures the victory.
They
They're
are
not
talking to him.
interviewing Tiger right then.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
That
they're
is true.
interviewing him 2 hours earlier.
But
yeah.
good comeback story.
Yeah,
Post it on YouTube later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
you're right.
finish you just hosted a competition and this person won the competition. Do that first.
Yeah.
And then let them have their glory that they just fucking earned and worked their ass off for. And then go all maybe even just have a process. It's I'm going to go to 2, 3, 4, and 5 and get the stories. And then they would have hit her
Don't sour
anyway.
the whole mood.
Let me ask you guys this then. So I think on the male side of the competition, it's still open.
Yeah.
Like watching Medeiros, he's super talented, but even at Syndicate, I was like, man, this guy, he definitely beatable. And that's not a knock on him. Just there's a lot of really good guys.
You probably just gave him some fuel if you heard that.
Good. I hope so. I actually like
He's
the
a
way that he
likable dude.
competes.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. So here's my question though. Would it be better for the sport if he goes on a dominant run, or would it be better for the sport if there are multiple guys over the next couple of years that win? So it's 3 years,
So
3
hard
different
to
guys.
say.
Yeah. I think it all just depends on how it's displayed and how appealing and personal the people are. Because I think Froning tied into a certain part of U.S. culture and U.S. values and was a really good role model that blew up. Frazier, I think it was just his appeal was his dominance and the intensity with because he had really no public image, which I guess in some ways is a public image. It's I'm only here to show up to win and I don't care about anything else and whatever. And that was interesting. So I feel like they had a good, they had a good way about creating growth in that.
I think
go ahead.
The ideal situation would be dominance with a rival who's right there.
Yeah.
Rather than just
that's
being
what
dominant.
happens in tennis. There's actually 3 of them.
That would be awesome. I mean, that's Jordan, the 6.
But you couldn't have that in this sport because there's not enough opportunity. It would be only there's
Once a year.
one Grand Slam every year.
That's true.
There's only one competition that you have the best in the world at.
Maybe we do need to spread it out.
Which is also part of creating the test is if you make them like the CrossFit Games, you're not doing multiple of those a year for very long. So you'd have to be okay, well, we have off-season tests, but the confines of the off-season tests need 1 day, only 3 tests, or the tests have to be under these loads or these movements, or you'd have to give people some heads up for what they're preparing for. Otherwise, they're just in a constant state of going to war, and that's an unsustainable way to create rivals, I think. I think having... hey, there's 10 good opportunities to make money and be against the best in the world throughout the year. Maybe it's mandatory you do 6 of them. Then you have your ability to fluctuate with the other 4 and take your off seasons. Or if you get hurt, right now, if you get hurt before quarterfinals, your season's basically over, right? You're not going to get
no chance.
Yeah, it's well, you could be a 7 times CrossFit Games athlete. You can't just get a bid to semifinals or a bid to the games. The people who win the U.S. Open, they get to go back. They don't need to qualify or whatever the tournaments
that's how it works.
I think that same thing, those types of things should be put in place, which allows us to build our superstars. I think it's almost like a gift and a curse. Our previous champions, dominant champions, made it look too easy. Right, they're just oh yeah, you just got to do 300 GHD sit-ups a week on top of your strength work and whatever to be good at GHDs. I'm all right, well, most people can't do
you
that.
and one other person.
Yeah, I'm well, most people's spines are going to explode, and then they start getting tweaked when they lift. It's it's a great idea to do that, but most people aren't going to have the resilience, and then you're not going to be able to create a sport. You're just going to have it's almost like it would be the equivalent of I think it was Iranian or the lifting Bulgarian lifting where you just came in and you maxed out multiple times a day, every day, and you broke 100 people. It's well, then you're literally creating a sport like that. It's you'll have 1 or 2 dominant people that are built either are on a lot of drugs or are just super resilient, or a combination of those, and then a lot of people that just break and can't
Well,
sustain.
that worries me for the sport in general now, like without even going into the extremes, just like the normal, I look at Travis's gym and they have smart programming, but still people are coming in that maybe don't know how to do things. And you need to be taught how to squat. You need to be taught how to go overhead and do some of the skills that people want to do. And I get it. Like there's interest in doing a handstand walk into toes to bar and GHDs, whatever. But if you're just jumping into that there is spinal compression when you're doing a GHD, and there's good research on that. So if we're going to use it in a testing body, that's one thing. But if the general population are doing those things, they need to be taught correctly how to do those.
Yeah. And also why?
I agree with that, but people still want to do it. Like, why do
What
we
a mess,
do certain things?
That goes back to the point of the mixing of the methodology and the sport. It's like they're
you
so
could get
intertwined.
a really
it gets
good
sticky.
6-pack and look good and be super strong without being in that hyper extended position for a regular, I mean, to do muscle ups and to do handstand walking and back flips and like you want to be a cream of the crop athlete. Yeah, whatever. You're going to get on a GHD machine and go backwards and do GHDs? Fine. Like, who cares? You can do anything. But for most people, it's like, what's the fitness gain you get from that? And for elite athletes, is there an effective method to test core endurance and that hyperextension without having to do that?
Yeah.
And it makes it a lot easier not to bring those fucking big ass things to competitions.
I agree.
They're so heavy and hard to move.
Is there a way to train it without doing 300 a week where you can still be good and competitive at them? And maybe the answer is no to that.
The answer is yes, because we've done that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess they're probably close to 200 or 300.
There's still a lot, right?
They're still doing a lot.
But that would make more sense, like the minimum effective dose for all of these things.
Yeah.
I think part of that, though, is probably psychological in that people think they need to do more. And if they're not doing enough, then they get screwed in their head.
Or they want to play that game.
They want to play the volume game.
Yeah,
and
they
want
to play. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like,
well, we've been
had
taught that.
The guitar analogy. It's like you listen to Jimi Hendrix, you want to play that riff. Doesn't mean you want to be Jimi Hendrix, the actual person, and have to do everything he did, but you want to play his little riff. People look at this stuff and they're like, oh, I want to do that craziness. It's not that they actually want to be a competitor or whatever, but they just want to play the game a little bit.
Yeah, I think the methods of the people that have been really good at the top have not all been the same, but it does seem that volume is almost just a necessity to be good because the volume of the test at the CrossFit Games is just so high.
I would love to have Matt Fraser and Rich Froning on the podcast and just like dissect their training methodologies, because to me it seems like they were very different, and obviously they have very similar results. I think Fraser's probably a little bit better, just more fit.
Don't say that when if you ever get him.
Yeah, I think I would.
So question one,
get the fight.
Do you think you're as good as Matt?
I know you're not. I know you're not. But just tell me. I mean, I say that more so because there's like it's kind of, I like it, right? It's like you have your like fan, your team, and you're a fan of them, and then some people love Rich, some people love Matt. But it would be interesting to see.
There would be no
what the
Fraser
is.
Without Froning.
Yeah,
there wouldn't be no sport to be at.
No, that's true, man. He is the OG, and I respect that, but that doesn't mean I don't think that Fraser's more fit. He is. Yeah, so where do you think the sport will be in 10 years? Do you think it's going to continue to grow and be something that is profitable, or no?
Yeah, I just don't think it's going to look like what it looks like right now.
What does that mean?
I don't think that what they're doing right now is sustainable, and it's obviously not. Well, I don't want to say it's obviously not working, but if growth is the goal and growth in viewership and all of that stuff is the goal, I feel like that was peaked in 2018 or maybe 2019. COVID definitely plays a role in that, but
For sure.
I think the profitability of these competitions, the way that they're run, it doesn't make sense to do that. I think that those semifinals should have division. Like I went to Lowlands, I thought it was, and Granite Games, and they had community divisions, and I actually thought that was good. And most of the fans of our sport are also participants of it.
Right.
So if you go and you compete in a community division and the elites afterwards, you're going out and watching, and putting people in the crowds makes it good for the athletes, makes it good. When they were watching the live stream, when I was watching the live stream of Syndicate, I was like, oh my God, it looks empty. It looks like nobody's there. And then when people were lifting, it was like quiet at MAC. And I'm like, man, is this what we like? Is this... That's okay if that's the sport, but if that's the sport, then I feel like what Chris said, we don't need spectators. You could just like bring it in and do it like we do our athletes.
I heard someone else.
Oh,
say.
somebody said it. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think it'll change.
Can we switch gears real quick? I want to get y'all's thoughts on Last Chance Qualifier coming up.
I fucking love that they have it because I've been I hate admitting that I've been in the position of being 1 or 2 spots out from qualifying of CrossFit with an athlete or for so many years. And it sucks where it's like, this is your only chance to qualify. You missed by 1 spot. Could have been like, could have not even been a fitness thing. It was like, you just like missed a lift under pressure, or like got a no rep that threw your time off or whatever, and you have no chance. So I love the idea.
So what's all of our different kinds of stories? We got Hamza, who, what was his story real quick?
Hamza was supposed to be in the Far East, something with visa and politics and immigration. He can't leave the country, and if he does, he might not be able to get back in. So they basically it's his only chance. He's in the only chance qualifier, which I feel like is kind of sucky because his whole field already had a chance. But it is what it is.
So how did he get a spot with
They
that?
just put it in. This was just the solution.
Yeah.
That was like, hey, we'll hook a brother up.
He reached out
nice.
and said,
Yeah.
I cannot travel. Like
Okay.
he literally could not
That's
travel.
pretty
there.
cool of them.
Yeah.
So then we have Sarah, who was 6th.
Yeah. Then we
And
have Jake, who
was 6th.
6th.
And Connor Duddy,
Connor Duddy,
who was 6th.
6th.
And how many people get to go from this thing?
2, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a 30-ish person field, and 2 people make it.
Yeah, I don't know how many total it is.
I mean,
But
it's interesting. I don't know what the tests are going to look like. They were different last year.
And how many days is it? 3?
3, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It goes back to that original conversation of the tests really do depend, or they dictate who goes to the games. And it's the same thing here, that you're going to have a 30, if it is 30 people, 25, whatever, person field where everyone's really good. And so it's just going to come down to how many tests there are, how long the tests are. Is it strength bias? Is it CrossFit bias? Is it
Are they
gymnastics
well-rounded?
bias? Exactly. All those things. And if it's only a couple of tests, you're just not going to, you cannot be sure you're getting the best person. But I don't know if that's necessarily the reason that they're doing any of these tests, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious like why they did this. I'm guessing because they got so many complaints in the past about the fact that if you missed it from regionals, your season is just over.
Right.
They didn't really have that many times where somebody really big named didn't make the games through regionals, though. They had a pretty good run, I feel like, from 2012 to 2017 or 18.
All I know is I can't wait to see the Hiller videos on this one.
On what?
The last chance qualifier. I'm sure there's going to be some good ones.
Yeah.
It's also interesting if you do it in your own gym. I mean, the environment is just much different. The pressure is different. If they're able to restart a workout, that changes the game. You miss a lift. If it's something where you have to lift first and then do something, you can restart that.
You go exactly when you're ready.
Right.
You know, to
we
watch
had
people
Alexis do it last year, and who else? There was one more person. I forget who, though.
Cedric,
yeah.
Cedric, yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't finish. I don't remember exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I think it was a max deadlift or something like that. He hurt his back and then
he's
withdrew.
had some back issues. I mean, but you think about it, how many people missed out or were close because they missed their last jerk or they missed one of the front squats or something.
Yeah.
Under pressure, you miss, you're done.
Yep.
Here, you're going to be able to redo that. So all of those things, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I do think it just is, it's a much different test and scenario, and that is probably not the best format to get the best people to the games.
Yeah, for sure not. But I also think that most of the current best people made it through to semifinals.
Yeah.
There's definitely some very, very good people in both fields, male and female. But
for sure. I wish we could go and like do like some kind of like, I don't know, digital scenario where you had the 30 people that make the games or however many males and females, and then you run them through like all these scenarios where there's 12 different tests and then another 12 different tests and another 12 different tests and see how they all stack up.
Yeah.
Like, are there always going to be the same winners or is it going to change?
I actually don't agree with the argument. I think that when people say the fittest keep winning, it was like, yeah, but you also had very predictable patterns and repeated workouts that were the same every year. Like we've pulled all the data, like the amount of muscle ups and whatever. Like I think you could, I know this might be controversial and it might be hard to do, but I do think that you could have created a series of 15 tests where Matt Frazier or Rich Froning didn't win.
Yeah.
I think it would include probably like a max broad jump, a 100-meter sprint, a 500-meter row. Like you have 3 tests now of your 15 that are all sub 15 seconds. And like generally the most dominant people in the sport are super volume heavy. They're super volume heavy because it's been tested like a military endurance event, not like hey, we have these subset of tests that are this duration and this time. And then you have them now as the leaders of the culture dictating how the sport's going to move forward. And of course, well, this is how I want, and this is what I think is fitness, and this is what I'm really good at, and this is my programming bias. It's going to continue to like push where we go in the direction that we go. But I do think that testing matters in all fitness tests, right? Like, yeah, whatever. I was going to say Travis is really fit and he can breathe better than me, but if we got into a ring and we turned into a fight, I bet you I can make him out of breath in less than a minute.
Yeah.
It's like, that is a whole totally different context of fitness in that capacity. And I think that's true. Like, that's fighting, and it's like a silly, different type of thing. But
do you think, so remember, I think it was 2012, maybe somewhere around there. It was when we had the phrase, the sport of fitness has arrived.
Yeah.
And I feel like, is it that which got us all switching from this is the CrossFit Games to this is a sport? And if so, was that CrossFit's saying or Reebok?
I think Reebok.
Reebok's
took
blame.
The sport of fitness because they
planted that seed
CrossFit.
of using this, because then we all just started saying the sport of CrossFit to differentiate from what was happening in class.
Yeah.
I don't know the process of that, but I like the idea of a sport. I mean, I really do think that that's the path forward. It has to be a legitimate sport. You have to grow it. You have to get media contracts. And if you do that, then more people will come in, and it would be more fun to be a viewer. It'd be more fun to be a coach. It'll be more fun to be an athlete because now there's going to be money in it. And I know we've talked about all those things, but like that's the process of a sport that grows, and that's the process of a sport that stays for a long time.
What were your questions? Well, I had no idea. For context, for viewers, I had no idea what we were podcasting about. He said he had questions.
We haven't talked about any of those.
Of it?
No,
Okay.
no. I'm going to actually save that, Chris, for another podcast.
I would have loved to hear those.
No, I think we should save that.
Like this is our 20th podcast bitching about the sport.
Yeah.
Could you just read the questions and then I just won't answer them? I'll be like, that's a good one.
Okay, let's, as a thought exercise, if you were listening to this episode of us bitching about all, not bitching, but I'm just saying it.
I'm providing constructive
I know,
feedback.
I'm just kidding when I say that. But if you heard this, what would be a critique on us?
Oh my God.
Like, you know, see what I'm
wait to
saying?
read 'em.
Yeah.
Let's critique our stupid little views real quick so
Yeah.
people can feel better about it.
Have you ever seen the meme of like the scroll and it's like my to-do list for the day and it just like keeps rolling down? That would be my self-criticism pamphlet.
What was the comment of the guy? This was like 2 years ago that like he canceled our online program, and then it was just like a paragraph of how bad we were. Do you remember this?
No, I don't remember.
Do you remember this guy?
No.
Oh man,
I feel like
I
we've
should
had a couple
find that.
of
Yeah, I
those.
need to find it
Yeah.
and read it for the audience. It was
I've
great.
actually, people have left negative comments on YouTube and I've taken
Yeah.
the time to like put like full paragraph responses in there trying to shit back on them.
And then you delete them or you post them?
No, I've posted them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think some of them are great. Like I want constructive criticism, but like when people are just trolling, it's whatever.
This is my intention coming in was not to troll. It's like, I think there's legitimate problems
sure.
that obviously the community thinks there's legitimate problems about. Like Andrew Hiller got famous in 3 months just shitting on these problems because he's saying things that are like,
And he's not tied to anything, so
Yeah.
he could be
No, he
free
can do
as a
whatever he wants.
bird.
yeah, he could say, he doesn't have athletes that he needs to be concerned will get no reps at competitions wearing his no rep shirts or
I actually do now appreciate. I've seen a couple things where he's giving some thoughts on ways to change it. At first, my criticism of him was that he's just bashing people for no reason. Or maybe there's a reason, but he wasn't giving any constructive criticism to actually change it.
Yeah.
So as long as, as a community, let's talk about it. We can go on these rants, but let's also find ways to make it better because we all do care about it. I care about my athletes. I care about the athletes within the Training Think Tank organization. I also care about the other athletes so they're not getting screwed. Like, as much as I would love to see Travis beat Brent Fikowski, I don't want Brent to be at a disadvantage because his feet are hitting the ground on chest to bars. Like, I want a fair playing field so that we can have a really fun sport to watch.
Yeah. I was wondering how I would feel about that. I feel like if I
wanna
beat you in something and you were in a cast, I'd be like, I still beat you.
Fair enough.
I still won.
I mean, there's something to be had when it is a fair event, and then it's like the best person truly wins.
Yeah,
I think that
agree.
makes it fun.
Yeah, it's not I feel like it's just an unlevel. Well, that's what I was saying about the tests at the games being leaked or people knowing about them or people knowing what they would be using. It's just like having a non-level playing field. there's always going to be a little bit of a non-level playing field if you're a superstar, because they get special treatment no matter what. But when the special treatment is like you actually understand what we're doing for the sport this year before other people, if that's happening, that's one that's got to get fixed immediately.
Yeah. Do you think it is?
Yes.
Oh,
I do.
that's my whole point earlier.
I'm 100% sure.
I know
because
we've been leaked.
We found stuff
And if we're
out
like
before.
on the fringes, then you know the people who are closer.
And we've had
And it's
people
probably not even-
send anonymous message saying, we know that people that you're competing against know these workouts, and we don't feel comfortable with the fact that they're preparing them and you're not. And then you're like, well, what the fuck do I do now? Like, I know. Should I just fucking whistleblow and tell everyone? Should we
honestly,
prepare for them?
The problem is
how long
part
is this
of the
been
unknowable
happening?
because it's like it's just human nature. If like you were the crit guy, it's just going to pass, and you don't mean,
can't keep
even if you don't
secrets.
mean to,
Yeah.
it's just going to get out.
Yeah. So I think systems for allowing the unknown and unknowable to die a death, or have it be known and knowable, or having
or the majority
unknown,
of it be known.
having unknown components truly be unknown and not dictated until
Or a list of potential unknowns.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know.
If they're happening now, they would always happen. So that the problem with saying like, oh, we have a list of things that still
the
can be
leaks
unknown,
would
they would
still
still happen, and people would still know about it. I think
Yeah.
that's always going to be the challenge. I mean, that's the case in any business or.
Yeah.
Well, what are y'all
Tough.
eating for lunch?
I don't know.
Well, he's when are you allowed to eat?
Well, I mean, I don't have strict guidelines. I think my
He's
8 hour.
intermittent fasting. Oh, you're doing 16-8 though.
Yeah,
16
but I mean, it's like
fast and-
14. What would 14:10? Sometimes
Okay,
it's
so you-
16:8.
so
It just
sometimes
depends on where my
8:16.
schedule.
Randomly
I think,
intermittent fasting.
Yeah, I'm supposed to eat at 12, but we're going to the field at 12, so I probably won't eat until like
Man,
2.
it is hot as shit right now. Godspeed out there.
Yeah.
I went and did running it. So I guess I'll conclude with how out of shape my legs are for running. I went to the track with Alexis, Sarah, and Travis, and we were working on like pacing races at the games, because I feel like it's hard to do that. So in the process of doing that, I did some of their running intervals with them where I acted as a disruptor. So every time Travis tried to pass, I sped up and tried to keep him off the inside lane. And I did like half of 2 of the intervals, and I could barely fucking walk right now. And I was like, how am I going to help them today? I feel crippled.
You want a golf cart? You can pull a golf cart in front of him.
I want like
Why don't
a
you just
I want
borrow
a
one of these
wheel.
athletes from the gym to do that?
Yeah, I know. We got a lot of fit people.
It's
in
because
there.
I'm not planned ahead enough. I probably could be like, hey, I need you to do this.
Oh, I hope CrossFit comes in and they're like, oh, you want to talk about our games? Let me talk about your playing on the food.
I'm gonna shit on your videos.
Oh man.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to rant, and I appreciate your constructive criticism, Max. We have a whole new podcast that'll be coming out in a couple of weeks with actual
on
questions.
those questions. I can't agree
That's
to that.
the one I was
are
hoping
they,
we get
Are
to.
they
I know,
like
I'm
time
sorry.
We should
sensitive
put to
questions?
bed
No,
this
no,
shit.
no.
We got Hiller out there doing the Lord's work. Sevan helping the case.
Yeah,
I think
Sevan and him have
our
been-
duty here is over. Maybe once a year we revisit a rant or two.
Yeah,
What you think, boys?
I'm down with whatever.
once a month.
Yeah.
No.
It felt kind of good to rant.
Let us know in the comments. Do you like these rants? I think I'm kind of over it.
Holy shit! It's been an hour and 51 minutes.
The next
See,
one's
that's what
going
I'm
to be
saying.
even
We
longer.
just talked about that rant for an hour,
Yeah.
51 minutes.
Yeah, whatever.
All right,
Wait,
peace.
where are you
Going.
going?
I wanted to press the button. I don't know why I needed to be